To begin with, of course, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and First Peoples of Australia and their continued connection to their country and culture. And we repay respects to elders past and present and to all First Nations people. George, next slide. So throughout the forum, we will hopefully have some polls that we would ask you to answer, quick and easy polls, which help us to make sure we're hitting the mark. So this is a forum, so it's a discussion, and the specs are driven by your feedback and your contribution. So feel free. Who do we need to mute?
I'll deal with that.
Thank you. Feel free to unmute yourselves and interrupt if you have a question to ask. Don't think you can't ask, or you can pop it in the chat, because I will monitor the chat whilst we go through the presentations, and I'll interrupt the speaker and ask a question for you if you cannot do it yourself. So today we've got George Havakis, who's going to be talking to us about B-Spec, and those two logos there, or QR codes, are one is for George's LinkedIn and one is for my LinkedIn. So George is going to talk about B-Spec. I'm going to assist with emceeing and fixing the polls and making sure that we're all engaged. And my background is I've been in spatial in a consulting and strategic role for about maybe 15 years. I don't want to say longer, but I'll stick with 15. And I'm helping George out with his forums as I do every year. So next slide. So please keep your, unless you're going to ask a question, keep your microphones on mute so that we can have a smooth presentation, etc. George will give you what's so right now, clarifications, interpretations, community experience. We'll have Gaby doing tech tips, and Gaby is our resident QGIS expert and all-round data spec extraordinaire. And we'll also hear from Michael Balfour, who's an engineer and has been in spatial forever, and he'll be talking to you from a community perspective. So I'd like to hand you over to George, and George will kick us off with B-Spec.
Thank you, Kelly. Just I think you just gave Michael a promotion. I don't think he's an engineer, but he'll talk a bit more about himself when he comes on. But welcome everyone. So you've just been experiencing the networking element of the forum. My name is George Havakis, and I'll be leading this forum today, supported by Kelly Island, Michael Balfour, Gaby van Veek, and also Natalie Northey, who is just not on my screen at the moment. But our team has worked fairly hard to put these forums together, and we're pretty excited that we've finally kicked off. So this year we're looking at, actually before I do that, let me go on to housekeeping. So for people that are looking to get some professional development points, you can, if you're one of these organisations, you can request points from having attended these forums. We will have an attendance list as a result of you registering into the forum today, so we can verify that on your behalf. As well as that, Natalie will be, or our team from Teams to Events, Venues to Events, will be providing each attendee with a certificate of attendance, just as a record of your attendance here. There will be questions during the sessions. We'd love you to respond. However, if you're more comfortable listening, we love that too. Each time people see this particular head, the head with the cogs, it means that we will endeavour to run a poll. I know Kelly will work it out because she's a bit of a guru with all of these things. So that's the housekeeping. Look, one of the important things if you've dialed in by your phone, no problem. If you are going to receive a call, please don't put us on hold, because we'll end up listening to your holding music, which sort of overshadows everything else that we try to do. But feel free to log out and then log back in. The other thing is, just before I start, is that this session is being recorded. All our sessions are being recorded. And if you'd like to see previous versions or previous recordings of the last few forums, you can. We have an A-SPEC YouTube channel. If you haven't received a link to that through our communication over the last couple of weeks, please let us know. Just pop your name in the chat and we'll address that today. So last year we launched the new specifications. So we affectionately call them the 2023 versions. The purpose of this next couple of slides is to look at who is actually providing data in the new versions. So we're looking at a yes or a no, considering it, or you might need more information. So Kelly, do you want to see if you can get this poll going? Otherwise, put the questions. Are you focusing on putting the questions in the Q&A, or where will you put those?
I'll try the poll.
Okay.
And if it doesn't work, I'll pop it in the Q&A.
Okay, got it.
What was your question, Paul? George?
Who's providing data in the new version?
Can you pop in the chat if you can't see the poll? I think it's live for me. No responses, so it's not showing.
There's one response, but that's from me. I don't know that we have any other responses. So
I'll pop it in the Q&A.
Yep, pop it into the Q&A. So we'll endeavour to put all of our questions into the Q&A today until we can see if we can resolve our polling issue. If not, we'll endeavour to get your feedback. So just for the short term, could I get a digital show of hands of who might be who is requesting data into the new version, please? Just a digital show of hands. Great, thanks, Harry. Anyone else? James, Anna, are your organisations requesting data? Yep, Cat Baird, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so the next part is, again, a digital show of hands. Who is delivering data in the new version? So this will be essentially from, yep, thanks Scott. Anyone else from our community? Martin, I think you're pretty close to delivering data into the 2023 versions, I think. Okay, got it. Thank you. You can put your hands down now. Thanks very much. Is there anybody from our participants today that would like to share their experience of transitioning specifically around B-Spec? In the other forums, we'll have the same kind of question, but related to the other specifications. But is there anybody around B-Spec that wants to talk about transitioning into the new version? Harry, is that your hand up from the last time, or you want to share something?
Sorry, that was from last time. I'll take it down.
Okay, but yes. So whilst I've got you, Harry, we were talking a little bit before about getting an understanding, so you can actually provide some guidance to the infrastructure team. What are the kind of things that your council is looking for in terms of componentisation for buildings?
At the moment, we break our buildings down into, I guess, about 8 components, which is the roof, the services, fittings and furnishings, substructure, superstructure, air conditioners and hot water services. I think that's about it. We don't recognise multi-layered buildings like first story, second story yet. We're doing our value, from my point of view, I'm doing a revaluation of our land and buildings this year, and I just want to know what information I can get, or what I should get for our valuers when they respond to our valuation.
Understand. Okay, well, that's certainly something that we can touch on offline from this. In terms of essential safety measures, are you interested in looking at your spaces within the buildings, as in what different office or different areas are used for, like offices or meeting rooms, that sort of thing?
No, George. My interest right now is the top priority is to get the valuations done. You're talking more asset management, and that's our infrastructure team will be probably more interested in that. I don't think we actually have B-Spec on our site yet, because the infrastructure team have focused on the A-SPEC, the D-Spec and
the R&O.
Yes. Yeah, the R. Yeah. So that's something that I want to follow up with them.
Okay. Yeah, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, and one of the things that I want to make people aware of is that we've actually got 2 versions of the specification, and I want to spend a little bit of time about this. So one of the questions that Kelly, or the first question that Kelly will put up is, has anyone undertaken backlog capture using the existing asset spec? Now, I just want to recap on these. So the purpose of the 2 versions. So you'll see that we have B-Spec DDS version 2.0.6 and B-Spec existing version 1.0.6. So the purpose of these 2 versions is that the DDS version focuses on new assets. So anything that is built from new or maybe refurbished. Whereas the B-Spec existing version is around capturing asset data of assets that are already existing in the space. It might be through backlog data capture or additional field capture to verify inventory. Or as Harry has discussed previously, that they're looking at some specific components so they can guide their valuers as to what valuations need to be based on. So we're always interested to see if people are using B-Spec, and I'll show you the existing version versus the DDS version. So if Kelly, are you putting any questions in yet? Yeah, thank you. I see. Where are you from? Survey, developer, council, or other? Thank you for that, and thank you for the people that are responding to that. So Kelly will put up these questions shortly. She's furious. I'd imagine she's furiously typing in the background. So just bear with us on that one. Now, whilst she's doing that, you'll all be familiar with this. And so one of the key things is that here are the asset types that are covered, or a part of the asset types that are covered during B-Spec. Now, the reason I brought this particular table up is to have a look at, well, what does this table actually show? So we know that area work extent, there's the file name that if you're delivering it, needs to be a polygon, the description. So what is this IPWA importance rating, essential safety measures, and attribute table? So when we were compiling the B-Spec specification, we had a look at the building practice note from IPWEA. And in that, you'll see that for those people that are using it or looking to use it for your asset management environment, you'll see that there's a table there about importance rating. So for example, building footprint importance rating 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there are 5 categories. So what that means is that depending what category it is, will determine, from our perspective, will determine how much data is captured. So if it is any category from 1 to 5, you capture the building footprint. Whereas for communication and data points, buildings that are importance rating of 3, 4, and 5, you really only need to capture data points for those. You don't need to capture data points for the others that are not mentioned. And that's how to read this particular table. Now, in terms of essential safety measures, you'll see that not every field has a yes against it. And the reason for that is that we've looked through the essential safety measures guidelines for the audits that are being undertaken by building surveyors and others, and we've determined that to be able to satisfy the essential safety measures, and we look to make sure that this is current, is that you need at least the building space, you need at least the conveyance system, and where the doors and windows are, electrical equipment, because of the safety requirements where you have exits and the like. So there's a much more extensive list, and I'd imagine that even though the building footprint is not marked as a yes, right? Fundamentally, if you don't have a building footprint there, you can't really put into context where the different building spaces and the different assets are. Kelly, are you trialing a poll again, or is that just popped up on my screen?
Can anyone see the poll? Sorry, from George.
Yeah, feel free to take yourself off mute.
No.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so we've been fielding a lot of questions around, well, how do we start with B-Spec? And going to, again, I'm going to refer to Harry's question around, well, what is it that he needs to advise the valuers on? And I think that really comes back to, well, what are those 8 components? So those 8 components from a B-Spec perspective would be matched up to these asset types, and that would provide detail. Harry, we're not showing specifically any detail about those. I've got, and as I said, we'll cover that offline so you can see in more detail the things that are relevant to you, particularly around fittings and your components around roof and substructure and the like. Right, but it's quite I think it's quite a daunting exercise to have a look at B-Spec and say, well, okay, how do we apply it? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Anthony, I see you on there, and I know that we've talked about this quite a lot. Would you be open to just sharing a little bit about the experience? Like you You presented last year at our B-Spec forum, and it was really great, and you're presenting this year at our A-SPEC forum. But I'd be interested in some of your comments around how have you rationalised what to capture first, if that's okay with you. If not, no problem, just let me know and I'll continue.
Hi, George. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Anthony.
You did put me on the spot.
I know you can handle it.
Yeah, look, it's been a bit of a hard road to get this one going. It's not every day that a council has a significant building built. So it's pretty hard to get a bit of traction on something that's infrequent. I guess where we are since the last time we spoke, was probably a couple of years ago, is just getting some parameters on what type of buildings we would want this survey for. So things that had HVAC, were multi-story, I guess significant buildings. So that kind of rules the toilet block out. I guess the challenges have been, still to this day, that the feedback we're getting is the architects aren't familiar with B-Spec. So having to sort of close the gap on what is how to provide that. Obviously, we're trying to come up with some closing the gap there, but we're waiting on some actual projects to finish, so we'll actually see if that comes to fruition when the building's finished. So we've got like a sporting centre and a couple of other buildings in the pipeline. So can't give specific data examples, but I think it was interesting to hear. I didn't catch the name of the person, but mentioning focusing on a reval year. I think that's quite common to satisfy that condition is probably a different level of data than satisfying an operational requirement. So yeah, we're still on that journey.
That's a work in progress.
It is, yeah.
No, I appreciate it. So,
yeah.
Look, thanks very much, because it's, you know what I'm like. I'm not just after the juicy success stories. I'm after what's actually happening in the real world, so that we can see what is the best way that GISA can support organisations in this. And I'm focusing more on B-Spec, on this discussion in B-Spec, because we're not seeing issues with the other specifications around this kind of capture. So I've been asked a few times the question, okay, so what's the starting point? Well, I think there's two things that have come out of this conversation so far. One, an operational perspective, and one, the financial perspective. So Port Hedland has particular requirements that they're looking at in determining how to value their assets. And then there's, well, what do we need to know about running the asset? So essentially, what we say is have a look at what you want to know about your building as a possible starting point. So it may be you look at the essential safety measures as your starting point, because the essential safety measures are probably going to get you there from an operational perspective. Whereas from a financial perspective and evaluation perspective, you probably need to look at which of these elements. So it might be things like the building itself, the floor system, the roof system, the wall system, the foundations. You know, where can we get that kind of detail in these specs? Now, we know enough to know that if you're looking at what's in a wall structure, well, it's too late once the building's finished, so you've got to go back to your original drawings. So there's swings and roundabouts of whether you have those drawings and somebody pours through them to then record them in your systems. So we don't say it's going to be an easy transition, but what we do say is that work out what you want to know and look at how you could deploy B-Spec. It might be for all of your existing infrastructure, you look at the existing specification, because not every bit of detail needs to be gathered, because there's some things you can see and some things that you can't see. So there's an element of pragmatism to this. And if we're looking at refining it further, you could probably look at capturing key requirements to facilitate management and maintenance of the assets. These are the kind of conversations that we've been having around B-Spec so far. We've had one council say to us, the things that they're looking at is the footprint, the spaces, major plant, and fittings, but fittings that are fixed, not fittings as in like a desk, fixtures and fittings like a desk or that sort of thing, but a partition wall that is fixed and the like. But I think that's about all I want to say about that. Is there anybody that would like to make a comment about this, either from a data capture perspective or from a B-Spec user perspective or prospective B-Spec user?
I'm just going to make a comment there, George. I'm from a finance department, so I'm not an engineer in any sort. So my immediate focus is looking at components of a building that have different useful lives. So that's at the moment, that's my focus. Our infrastructure teams will be dealing with the operation, their maintenance and the construction and safety and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think they're yet ready for the B-Spec, but they're definitely working on the other aspects of your products.
Yeah, thanks, Harry, and thanks for outlining putting context around your comments earlier. Appreciate that. Okay. So moving on from there. Again, what's the best way to use B-Spec? I've spoken about the existing version, and so in this particular case, what I've got is an extract of the table for building spaces. And what I want to show you is, excuse me, is this column here, which is specifically in the existing assets tables. You won't find this column at finish. The last column in the DDS version is code list, whereas the existing, we have this column here. And what we've endeavored to do in here is look at every attribute and determine if it's a core requirement, an optional requirement, or yes, required and may need more research. So it might be some field work, it might be looking up the drawings, the design and construction drawings, and determining information from there. So the purpose of this existing specification is to narrow down what can you physically see and address when you're out on site. So that's, whilst unique ID and building ID, it's a post-processing exercise. That's more about the identification of the building. There's other elements, other attributes there that deal with things like the insulation rating. You can't actually see inside of a wall what the insulation rating might be. So if it's a requirement, then you're going to have to do more research. So that's the way that the existing specification has been created. And we also see that whilst there's a greater opportunity to use B-Spec for new assets, then there's still some planning and prep that needs to be done. And Michael Balfour, who'll be presenting a bit later on, will actually talk about some of the things that he goes through with some of the capture projects that he's been involved with to provide some tricks and traps for young players, if you like. Okay, so what else have we been doing? So we continue to look for anomalies. So the specs are essentially almost 12 months old. And whilst we'd like to think that everything is ideal, it's perfect, we haven't made any boo-boos, it's not the case. We do make boo-boos, but what we also appreciate, and I'll show you some of the things that that's been picked up, we also appreciate the feedback that's come back from the people who are using the specifications, and they identify particular anomalies for us. Kelly, is that you're trying the poll again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think you and I are the only ones we're in rarefied air at the moment, Kelly, about seeing these polls. So I would just persevere with putting the questions into the Q&A like you have been. So so that's great. So I noticed that we've had about 6 people respond to where you're from. Please have a look in the Q&A. It's really important for us to get a sense of where people are, what discipline people are coming are from when they attend these forums. So getting back onto here, so here's a snapshot of what we've been doing. We've been updating the sample data. We've been updating the codes and code lists. So the codes and code lists, well, the codes specifically are dynamic, meaning that it's likely that some codes may drop off and some codes may be added during the life of a specification. So even though the version prior to this was published in 2019, there have been numerous additions and modifications to codes since the 2023 publication and also since then. So please make yourselves aware of the code lists. Now we have the code list in the spreadsheet, which can be downloaded from the website. Also, for all subscribers to the specs, you will be given access to the code list API, and we'll talk a little bit more about that further on during my presentation. And as I mentioned there, there's more scrutiny as the number of users increase. So we have more eyes on the product and different lenses on the products, which provides us with some the opportunity for some rigor, to apply some rigor. Now here's the changes that we've seen since the publication, and I've endeavoured to show what we believe is a low impact, a medium impact, or an actual impact. So these next couple of slides are going to go into that. So on this one, there are things like making examples in all documents and sample data aligned with the code list entry. So what we're looking at is things like there was no example for the building footprint. So people have been picking up on that because they use the specs. They use the specs to be able to set up their environment as well, along with the sample data. So So we make sure that we put examples in there wherever possible. This second one is an example of where we might have a mismatch between documents. So the sample data said one thing, the PDF said another. Wherever possible, please use the PDF as the source of truth. We endeavour to align everything else to the PDFs, and that doesn't mean to say that we don't have anomalies in the PDFs, but we make our best efforts to make sure that the PDFs are correct. The example at the bottom here shows that there's an errant character. So we look at, we didn't pick this up, but one of our users of the B-Spec product picked it up and identified it for us. So that will be coming out. That'll be corrected from this small dash ceramic to just ceramic. Then there are other things that, for one reason or another, have been omitted, or there's been significant typos. So in these examples, so there's been a code list reference omitted from the science table. So the attribute support material didn't have the sign material in the code list reference. So we've rectified that. And following all of these forums, a list of all of these anomalies will be collated and provided to everybody. They've already been sent out previously through one of our mail outs, but we're happy to send it out to again as required. This one, combo_1 versus COMB_1. Yes, not sure how that snuck in, but it seemed to infiltrate a few of our specifications. Now, obviously, combo_1 is not a relevant code. So if you're going from the code list, you'll see that that doesn't appear. The other thing that we're looking at is consistency, standardization, and harmonization across all of the specs. So in the problem table, and to date, I don't know that we've seen too many of these pop up in the submissions, but we had inconsistencies with the data type across the different specifications. So we're standardizing that. So wherever it is an alphanumeric, it is being changed to a number because we want the data type for the problem table for the number to be an integer. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand or put something into the chat. It doesn't look as though the polls or the chat is working efficiently for us today, so we'll end up persevering. So just a bit more detail about the problem type. So you can see that the problem number here was alphanumeric, 10 characters, etc. We're actually on every asset spec now. Oh, sorry, on every spec, you will now see the problem number being an integer, and that will have an impact on everyone because you'll need to adjust that in your data capture requirements. For those of you that have been downloading the sample data, you'll notice that there's an FID value. Now, this isn't an A-SPEC requirement. However, it does crop up because the FID is used by some softwares to create an arbitrary object reference ID. Gaby, did you want to say anything about that, or happy to leave it at that point?
I don't have to say much, only that One of the problems is that sometimes people, in the previous spec especially as well, there were no attributes needed. And people are used to sometimes capturing data without any attributes. The software that we work with nowadays forces an attribute. So if it doesn't have a unique identifier, it just uses that field to be able to uniquely identify every record in there and to keep everything together. And that's why it's done. But it's not always consistent as to what the name of that field is. So it's a bit hard for the users to control. Anyway, George, I think that's enough.
Yeah, thanks, Gaby. Look, to put it into my layperson's description, it's system generated and not an A-SPEC requirement, so it doesn't need to be ingested. You may be thinking, well, can I use that as the unique ID? We recommend you don't, because when you do changes in your tables, it'll renumber. That FID will be renumbered according to the order of where that particular object sits in your table. So you can see in this bottom table, we've got FID, we've got Area Works ID, we've got Building ID, etc., etc. So there are other IDs that are better suited to be used as unique identifiers. So our message is, don't ingest the FID and don't use it as the unique identifier of an object. So I want to reinforce a couple of examples here around governance. So with over the past 12 months, like what I've shown you is conversations that we've been having with different users, inputs, frequently asked questions, those sorts of things, guidance that's requested. And as you can see, there's not a lot of inquiries that have come in over the last 12 months. So this year we've been focusing more on, well, how can we take into account the governance requirement? You know, the data governance is particularly important. And so I want to focus on what happens for codes to change, or if you want to add new code list. So 3 main criteria, as you can see on the screen. So the main thing is that we want to put a lot of rigor into this. And I'm going to talk in a couple of slides' time about how we can actually streamline this process, right? But for example, here's an example where there's been a new attribute, so it's required a new code list, and we've created a new code list. Now that will only happen when there's a review of an asset type, or a new asset type has been created. So we typically don't create new code lists during the life of an asset class, or of a specification. Sorry, not an asset class, during the life of a version of a specification, because we want things to settle down and have people get used to things. The codes in the code list may change, but the code lists themselves will not go through dramatic changes. Okay, so crowdsourcing. We've communicated a couple of times. In fact, we sent out a communique to people who are registered with us in February this year that we want to crowdsource codes. Well, you might say, why? Well, there's a number of reasons. At the moment, the C comment field is used quite a bit. So what we're trying to do is, over the next 12 months, make the C comment field redundant. To be able to affect that change, we then need to create education and awareness that you as participants have the ability to change the codes, have the ability to create new codes, and not wait for GISA to be requested for a new code. So there's 3 resources that are available. There's the API, there's the spreadsheet, and then there's the web app that goes along with the API. Gaby, do you want to talk very quickly about the API?
So the API is based on the web app. It uses the same data. Both of those uses data that's available on the web. And if you have an organization, an IT team that has the ability to write some code, then you can use the API. The web app is really easy as well. And I would encourage you to have a look at the web app. There is a particular screen that allows you to add codes. Those codes become available, and we will be notified when you've made an entry in terms of that. And that's pretty quick and easy to manage from there on. There's a question.
Yes, from Alan.
Hi, Gaby. I am sort of quite new into this environment, like the API and the web app. Is it possible to just quickly show us at some point, Ray, what to access and how to access?
Why don't we set up a session where I take you through that separately?
That would be really good. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. All right. If I can just get George, if somebody can just get me his contact details.
Yep, I'll send you Alam's contact details.
Okay.
He's with the City of Perth, Gaby. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the 3 resources. Now let's talk a little bit about the crowdsourcing, what we want. So the process that we want you to start considering is, if you want to create a new code, and this is particularly for the data creators. So for the likes of yourselves, Martin and Shane and Scott, for your teams, when you see new features, because you're there at the coalface, rather than trying to work out, well, do I put C comment and then what do I type into the comments fields? We want you to trial looking at creating a new code. So the process will be if you have the API, you can do a search. If you have the web app, you can do a search. If you have the spreadsheet, you can do a search. So make sure that you have one of those particular products. So what I'm showing you there is an extract from the spreadsheet. So you can search by codes, you can search by code lists, you can search by description. What I've shown there is that in the code list column, I've typed in CAN, and CAN will then bring me up all of the codes. So these show all of the codes across all of the specifications, across the different versions, right? So and what will happen is that CAN doesn't appear, so I'm clear. So I can now create a code called CAN, put it into the code list, put it in as part of the submission, and have it known and make a comment that this was created, because until it ends up in the code list, we won't really know if it's a relevant code or not. So once you've verified that the code, you can use it immediately. The critical thing is to communicate it to GISA via contact form, or if you're using the API, you'll have the ability to communicate to us of a change. So we're shifting away from us. We'll be the custodian of the code lists, but we don't need to be responsible for creating them, and we don't want to be holding up the process for that. Any questions about that? Any yes, buts, what ifs? Feel free to take yourself off mute or put your hand up.
Doesn't it make it risky for anyone to change any existing codes?
Not if you follow the process.
Okay.
But also, George, if I can comment on that.
Yes.
So when you add a code, it only becomes available to you and to us. And only when it's approved by George or by George's team does it become available to other people. So there is a little bit of a check in there.
Awesome.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep. So, so the main thing that we'll do is that if you tell us you're going to use CAN, no problem. We'll go through the same kind of process to verify it, and can't see any issues with that. But look, there's a risk with everything, Alam. But if we follow the process and we're endeavouring to keep the process fairly simple, so it's efficient, what could go wrong? Okay, so another strong element of the governance side is these checklists, and we're seeing these that they're really becoming important to use for a number of reasons. We advocate with all of the subscribers to incorporate these checklists as part of your project management framework or part of your subdivision development assessment process. It's a practical way of actually identifying what is expected to be delivered at practical completion. So we know that if this was ticked off and there was an abutment to be delivered, then yes, the developer or consultant may do this as part of a subdivision development, whereas a capital works, the asset owner might tick it off. So there's a two-way check. So the importance here is that at the end of this code list, that both parties sign off. So this may be updated during projects because we often see minor changes. And Kelly, could you just mute that person for me, please? Thank you. And so by using this checklist, we've seen that we use it in our own projects, and again, Michael will talk a little bit about that, about the importance of it, because it really refines what the expectations are for the deliverables. And this can be part of the practical completion components. And not only is the as constructed data provided, but also a list to say, here's what you can expect in your as constructed data to save people having to trawl through design documents and construction documents, etc. So the second part of that is the quality assurance. Now, this is a brand new feature for all of the except for S&W spec. We've had this feature in there for a while. But what we're now seeing is that this has come about because there's still uncertainty as to whether data is design data or as constructed data. Now, I think in time there'll be more technical processes involved with determining that what's been designed and what's been built is actually being reflected in the data that's provided. But for the time being, we see this as an interim step to say, well, okay, in this example, in the ASCON there was 4 public number of WCs. In the design there was 3. So the difference was 1. Now, if this has been agreed to by council, great. If not, we're still requesting that the consultant preparing the data provide this, because we know from a council's perspective, if they're monitoring the works, then they'll take their own notes about where the changes have been. And the certification form, which we are requesting, is provided with every submission. And you'll see things on here like, datum, coordinate system, etc., construction date. So very valuable information. And it's also complementary to the area work extent boundary. But if there is no area work extent boundary, then this is really vital information as well. So what we've now done is combine the two elements, the certification form and the quality report, and we've provided it into a CSV. So the intention is cut down the number of documents to be provided, and this provides the information required at a project level. So it's a joint responsibility, and it's really important that both the asset owner and the service provider to that council or water authority that they're dealing with are jointly responsible for ensuring that the data that's required about that asset is actually provided, and that the asset owner gains confidence that everything has been dealt with. So we've provided this into a spreadsheet, a CSV, and it's available from the A-SPEC website. You don't need a login. Anyone is welcome to download it. Just go onto the A-SPEC website, in the search box, type in certification form, and you'll get an option to download the document. It's in a zip file. This was quite interesting, and we'll be talking about this at every forum. So there's a couple of areas that that we've seen this pop up over the last 12 months in particular. So this came up just recently from a news feed that I received about the Surveyors Board in Queensland that issuing that only registered surveyors can issue such certificates. Now, I've spoken to our Surveyor General in Victoria, and they're not. They're currently. They're not saying they're not going to do it. They're not saying they are going to do it. They're investigating what the likelihood is. So I think what Queensland is doing is ahead of the game, and I think it's also part of having registered surveyors who can issue particular certificates.
As normally.
Sorry, say that again, Gaby.
I'm just joking. I'm saying Queensland as normal, always ahead of the curve.
Do you know someone who lives there?
I might.
Okay. That's just an in-joke, everyone, because Gaby actually lives in Queensland. So, so we've seen this come up with two feeds now. Certainly the Surveyors Board of Queensland, and also some IPWA forums that I am monitoring. Now, if you want to follow up on this particular comment, I'm going to put the link into the chat. So feel free. So that's now posted in the chat. Feel free to log on to it and get some more detail about that. Okay, so just a little bit more detail when you click on that link. I've just grabbed a couple of extracts there, and it's pretty interesting the steps that they're taking to verify that as constructed plan is as it's meant to be. So you can see that they're talking about the different levels of surveyor registration, etc., etc. Please read that in your own as you need to.
So I just put that in the Q&A as well. If
Okay, thank you.
Can't access the chat. And also, George, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A if you wanted to just have a quick look around
Okay.
on that, just to make sure that you're covering everything.
Okay. All right. So Q&A. Sorry, I was looking in the chat. Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, so Harry, you mentioned that every asset must have at least one attribute. So the FID is not that particular attribute. We've created all of our asset tables now to have a unique ID. And so that's what's to be used. So hopefully that's answered your question about that. Okay, is there any other questions, Kelly? I think that's it at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Now, as we've talked about previously, we also, GISA also has a joint venture partnership with Whereabouts Consulting. So essentially, that's between, so you'll see myself talking about Digital Hive, you'll see Gaby talking about Digital Hive. We're the principals of Digital Hive, and so we look at how we can support the A-SPEC community through other work that might be more technically related. So, so I just wanted to bring that up and promote Digital Hive where I can. So we now engine. Look, Michael, you're up in lights. Michael Balfour, engineer. What?
I've changed careers.
Yes, you have. So look, this completes my update for you around B-Spec. As you can see, there was quite a lot of focus around the governance side. We think that the planning side of it will really make the projects a lot simpler to take on, and we put this into practice as well with the data capture projects that we're involved with, and that's essentially what Michael is going to talk to you about. So I'm going to stop sharing now and let Michael take on this next session. So thank you very much. And again, if you have any questions, put them into the chat.
No, in the Q&A, please.
In the Q&A?
Working, yeah.
Okay. Put them into the Q&A and I'll respond to them. So thanks again.
Thanks, George.
Okay, am I ready to go, Kelly? Am I?
Yep, just share your screen and
Hang on.
knock your socks off.
Do I hit the present in Teams button? Is this?
Yeah.
I don't think we're seeing it right here. I'm going to cancel.
We're seeing your presentation now.
Yeah, it's not like this. I think presenting in Teams is. I'll share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Just bear with me.
We can see the presentation now, Michael.
You can see it now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay. Bear with me. Okay. For those that don't know me, my name is Michael Balfour. Today we'll be highlighting pathways to success. A little bit about me. I've been working in GIS and asset management for the past 16 years, mainly with water authorities. I was part of an asset strategy planning and performance team. I would review as constructed data for completeness with project engineers and technical officers before it could be consumed by GIS, asset management information systems and financial registers. I'm involved with GISA and Digital Hive in project administration and on various projects involving the capture of geographical assets with A-SPEC data. The topics and theories we'll cover this morning can be applied to all A-SPEC specifications. So it's a broad stroke of the brush. The topics will be knowledge and understanding, why A-SPEC, asset and infrastructure, geographical location, what and where, about geographic datum, capturing data in the field, preparation and post-processing, capturing data in the field, checklists and forms, communication, engagement, internal and external stakeholders, data quality, the expectations of specification accuracy, and deliverables, documents, drawings, final and approved as constructed plans. We'll explore these topics as we progress. So knowledge and understanding, what we need to know. What classes are we working with? Knowing which A-SPEC classes your project is constructing and what's expected as the final deliverable to the client. Why A-SPEC compliance improves efficiency, accuracy and repeatability. Understanding of the authority's need for developing preventative maintenance and asset renewal replacement programs. Why do we need to do this? Some of the benefits that are provided from accurate asset data downstream are a better understanding of budgeting for future developments and previously mentioned asset maintenance programs. In this way, knowledge and understanding helps to improve the flow of asset infrastructure related information across businesses and authorities, with the financial reporting of infrastructure asset related information across businesses and government. Assets, infrastructure and locations. Firstly, where are the assets? Having all your spatial data accurately represented has massive benefits for organisations. Additionally, knowing where electrical components, heating and plumbing assets are located brings great value as well. Secondly, what is the quantity of assets to be installed and captured? Documenting the count and the linear measurement of assets within A-SPEC asset classes to be installed and constructed and then compared with the final as constructed drawing and documentation. Thirdly, spatial and aspatial asset data accuracy. We need to know where the assets are located and we need to know what they are made of. And lastly, compliance with the authority's acceptable tolerance range. As George mentioned earlier, this is going to become more important, and I'll explain a little bit further down where this has some impact. But is our deliverable data within the authority's allowable range of tolerances? Will there need to be reconstruction for such things as construction, drainage, hydraulics, or cadastre data? Okay. Here's an example of this is an example of live project we're working on. The top two images indicate alignment discrepancies between the planned and as constructed environments. The lower two images show the updated line work for the amended pathways. We're still working through these alignment issues with the clients and the surveyor. But clearly with the top left one, you can see that the plan drawing for the pathway, if we look by the truck there, you can see that when we overlay that with the current photogrammetry, that there is some misalignment or there has been an amendment to the constructions. Now, there'll be some financial impacts because of those, and they need to be recorded accurately and correctly for the final deliverables. On the top picture on the right, if you look towards the centre of the image, you can see there's a misalignment with the building footprint as well. And then on the bottom left image, you can see that there's now an additional blue line in there. Now that's meant to be an amendment to the below pathways, the pink information you see. However, that information is somewhat distorted and incorrect. So you can see then when we take the imagery away from it, underneath, you can see that things don't match. So these are some of the issues with getting your data right the first time, and taking your surveying your amendments and recording them accurately will stop this downstream bit of noise when your deliverables are due. So we'll look at now at field data capture preparation. So clearly, just in the last example there, we saw the plan versus some as constructed lines. And then when you compare that to the imagery underneath, it's clearly that these things don't match up. So it's really important that you amend your drawing, have a final as constructed drawing, constantly amending that and liaising with your stakeholders about those. Again, when we come back to the last image, when we look at the undertake a final site survey, this is critical to know that what you're delivering is accurate, which is pretty helpful. Reviewing all the information with your team or your engineers and construction or technical officers has a great advantage. And another issue is knowing that the requirements, the geographic data requirements for your client, and it's not just a site setup for a survey that you need to survey in a particular projection. So post-processing. Construction engineering tolerances levels must be within acceptable ranges. Record your changes and amendments and project as the project progresses. See two top images where the plan drawing is overlaid, as I mentioned earlier on, with the photogrammetry. Update the as constructed drawing and checklist as required. Don't leave until the last minute. A-SPEC attribute data. Has there been changes in materials, diameters, widths and depths? There can be a financial impact on project cost if these items are recorded incorrectly. An example of this is, for me, that when we began implementing GIS and AMOS within a business, that we received construction data. We received the plan data that we could consume into the GIS. However, the supporting documentation for capitalisation would tell a different story. So I'd have a count, say, for example, of 100 metres of pipe in the GIS, where the capitalisation form would have 150 metres. So where's that extra 50 metres of pipe that's been costed for? The account of things like fire hydrants and valves can be somewhat off as well. So when you compare what's been delivered to what financially has been delivered, that needs to be addressed, and these type of documents assist with that. The use of the use of the photogrammetry as a base to verify your drawings. Most importantly, create an audit trail, a drawing audit trail. When it comes to knowing where you're at, when someone wants to review a document, when you want to know if practices have been put in place, if the constructions are complete, you can look at your audit, you can go to those documents and see exactly where you are. A bit of a problem recently has been that that's not been the case. Trying to look for as constructed drawing versus a site setup are two completely different things. So understanding what those things are and the needs of the clients is pretty critical. Address all construction discrepancies in the final as constructed drawing, signed off by an engineer or surveyor. I didn't mean to put license in there, so I was thinking about Queensland then. So look, it's really good. Part of your review is that it's not just one person looking at it. You've got all the eyes of all the stakeholders on this, and any errors can be addressed before it's submitted. to the client. Then we'll just move on. The next one is, as George spoke earlier on, it's about checklists and forms. So the A-SPEC asset and data handover checklist has been created to assist in identifying and confirming which asset classes should be collected for the project. The project QA report documents a quantity acceptable tolerances and changes of assets in each specification to be collected, and can also assist in evaluating a completed project in conjunction with the asset and asset data handover checklists. These documents, as well as the asset attribute A-SPEC attribute data, can assist the authority in the capitalisation process of the projects for their financial and financial asset registers. These checklists can be utilised with both paper and digital forms. Users may also find it beneficial to integrate these checklists into their data management plans and best practices for field data collection. Look, I've experienced implementing GIS and asset systems and developing the flow of asset data throughout the business. The accuracy of the data, the accuracy and number and length of assets can significantly impact the asset financial register and the financial asset register for future budgeting and project forecasting. So you can find links to these documents on the specifications page on the A-SPEC website, as George mentioned earlier on. So next slide. So here this is a tip. So what we're looking at here is a typical compound of asset classes within a construction site. It's pathways, it's pavements, it's a building footprint, and a drainage file. These elements combine A-SPEC, D-SPEC, and B-SPEC specifications. The advantages of recording this data will assist with the capitalisation process. So, yeah, so if we just observe that centre image for a minute, you can see there that in the red there's a building footprint, there's pathways in purple. Even within those pathways are hard landscaping areas. And you can see that there's also pavement for parking. So it's really important to understand what you're going to pick up and and how that's need to be delivered. And these checklists assist with that, particularly the quality assurance. So I can't stress enough how important that is to understand at the completion of a project, is to have that information for your financial team. Okay, another example here is what we typically deal with. We receive what's on the left and capture what you see on the right using the B-SPEC structure. And what we see here in yellow is what we've identified is it's missing A-SPEC, B-SPEC attribution for this asset class. So knowing what you've got to capture, how you're going to capture it, and what data you need to apply to it is pretty critical. So that stops all the toing and froing with the clients. All right. We're going to talk about, so in communication, engage the stakeholders early, determine who will be responsible for specific tasks, establish and hold working groups, and ensure that the meetings are well documented. That's really important, documenting your meetings and who has to do what. Keep the project at the forefront during meetings. Working groups are excellent for reviewing the processes, as I mentioned earlier on. Talk to surveyors and developer consultants and speak to the asset team at the authority. Temper expectations and understand what the needs of the clients are. Don't be a silo. It's not difficult to reach out and talk to someone. It's better to do that than create an error. Data quality. Understanding data quality is just as important as the work itself. By avoiding data re-entry, identifying missing elements in plans and spreadsheets, and updating as constructed drawings, you can eliminate the need to follow up on late or incomplete submissions. Provide geographical asset data accuracy for as constructed drawings, and understand why A-SPEC is being used, and provide A-SPEC asset class attribution with accuracy. So, you have your your geographic datum, you know what you're getting, you know how many of these things you need to get. You understand the tolerances of these things, the changes in widths, depths and heights. These things are all important to get right to understand and get right from the beginning. So your deliverables, your final as constructed drawing, as I've mentioned earlier on, that's critical and it's important. Survey field report confirming the geographic datum, as George showed earlier on, and a sign off by a surveyor and engineer. And please note, a tolerance report should be created to show the variations between the design plan and the as constructed drawing details. This report should outline differences in invert level, cover levels, grades, lengths and offsets, as well as any changes in material or diameter from the original design. So outcomes. What we've learned is we're going to deliver accurate data on time, all the time. Correct procedures and policies in place with the right people knowing what they've got to do and when they have to do it. Communication between all stakeholders. No silos. No one's left in the dark. You empower the council with data they can trust. They know that they come to you and that you're going to supply quality data that's certified and hits the mark for their financial registers. And improved governance. I would think that some of these things we spoke about earlier on, who's doing what, when they're doing it, and who had to deliver it, should be built in. It's my experience that we've built this into contracts, the construction contracts. So when your developer consultants can adjust their financials or their rates to cover the extra work that's needed for these things, and then the business is confident that they're going to get accurate and complete data. And most importantly, for the private sector, it guarantees a quicker return for your bonds and or deposits. Thank you for your time. Any questions?
Look, that was really good, Michael. We have a shy audience, which is fine. Now,
I'd like to make a comment there, George.
Go right ahead, Harry. You're not shy.
No, I'm not shy. I'm the guy who actually does the capitalisation here at Port Hedland, and I cannot, and I made a comment in the questions, I cannot emphasise how important what Michael is saying is for me, because quite often I have to make up what the assets are that is in a construction based on the transactions that I see in the in going through the project. I very rarely get any information as to what the assets were intended to be built. And that is so frustrating from a bloke who has no idea what the assets should be. He can only go by what the transactions tell me. So what Michael's saying would be fantastic if I had that information.
Yeah, Harry, this is all doable. I've done this before, where we've used as constructed data, using all the processes and procedures that are put in. I spoke about that things built into contracts. Developer consultants know what they need to do. They're working with internal stakeholders, the engineers and technical officers, getting the accurate data before it even jumps consumed into the GIS. Once it's into this construction data in the GIS, then can be exported out to be used for the capitalisation process. So it's kind of can be done for you in a way, that, if you understand that, Harry.
I understand that, Michael. First of all, you've got to have a GIS system.
I know where you are, Harry. I'm broadly talking about the how it can be done, but you guys can realise that absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that coming in whenever it does come in.
Yeah,
I was going to add to it too, if I may. That was good, Michael. Thank you. Here at Dandenong, not with buildings, we are getting better. We'll come back to buildings, but in capturing. So our roads and footpaths and stuff like that, we're getting better with creating proposed assets before the invoice comes in based on, you know, the proposed construction, and then when we get the as constructed, we then adapt as we go along. But with buildings, there's a bit of a disconnect between our project teams and finance and us, so that quite often, you know, the building will be constructed, and we often find that, as Harry has pointed out, that the invoices don't line up with the assets at all, and we quite often have to get a survey done to measure it up. But I'm not sure if that's common. I know there's other council members here, but that's certainly what we find, that what we get as the as constructed is certainly not what we saw for the, you know, the design. It's problematic, but it's a bit of a disconnect between project teams and asset data and GIS. Yeah, we are getting better at it though.
Yeah, this where it comes back about the communication and putting your teams together, and everyone knows their roles, and it's. And I'll say this: it's not about people; it is about roles, because people leave businesses, so that role, that's their responsibility, and it's these people that come into these roles know what they've got to do and are capable of doing it. Again, you know, setting up all these procedures and policies, then it doesn't matter. You can have someone in your business who knows everything, and they leave, and then, oh, that guy knew this, or that person, that lady knew that. Getting it built into the business, into sorry, I'm forgetting.
It needs to be a process, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, position descriptions, everything. It's a whole gamut of governance that needs to take place. But once it does, it really, really works well.
Yeah, and we've started to get our, again, this is not buildings, but we're starting to get particularly our civil works people to use A-SPECs much better. Yeah, and we've even had some of the smaller contractors getting bigger contractors to do the A-SPEC survey on their behalf, which I think is fantastic, that they're actually attempting to try and get that data to us in a format that we can quickly consume it. But yeah, it's just, I think we're getting better at it. It's just buildings we really struggle. But I think that might be a little bit of the nature of council too. There's a lot of things that change in the field, and sometimes that's because we haven't had good data for them to base off before they started, you know, in terms of where pipes are and things like that in the ground. So anyway, that was really good. Thank you, Michael.
No, pleasure. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, George, can I please get Paul, just asking if it's okay if I can contact Paul later, actually, to get some insight about how they're creating the proposed asset?
Certainly.
Cool. Okay, George, it would be appreciated if you please pass the contact details of Paul.
I will do that. Thank you. And, you know, I love it when you guys communicate with each other. It's
happy to help.
We are a knowledge sharing community, and this is a great example of it. Michael, thank you. That was a really good presentation, and obviously it resonated with quite a few people. And just the one question I have before we jump on to Gaby is, how valuable has a checklist been when we've asked you to estimate times for capture?
I don't think I could have done it any other way, George, to be honest. I mean, I'd have to then, yeah, I don't even want to do it. It would be, you would, all right, there would have to be, you'd be factoring in the unknown. So, and due to past experience, that would be quite substantial.
Yep.
So you're blowing your quote way out of proportion, really.
Yeah, understand. Cool. Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay,
thanks very much. I will go back to sharing my screen. So, Gaby, you all set? We're now up to you.
Oh, I'm not all set. I'm gonna get somebody else to play a video.
Okay, cool. Over to you, Kelly.
Sorry, Gabe, I thought you were...
Hi, George, sorry to interrupt, actually. We have a real going on, so I'll just pause that thing, so I'll join back.
Okay. I think there's a bit of an emergency there.
It's one of those practice things, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, Gabby, the file I'm playing is the one that is in the B-Spec folder, recording 15 minutes.
Yep. Correct. A-SPEC are systems designed to manage and optimize the life cycle of physical assets, including.
Sorry, I want to play this in the
And share it.
in the thinger.
While Kelly's teeing that up, what we've done is we've asked Gaby to pre-record his presentation so that we don't get tripped up with technology, like sometimes that happens. But anyway, over to you folk again.
Especially since Gaby is in Queensland. You should have said that, George. You missed an opportunity.
I'll have others, Gaby. Don't you worry about that.
All good.
Okay, well,
I can go without that if it's necessary.
I just wasn't ready. Record your screen. No, I don't want to do that. I will be. 2 seconds.
Okay.
B-Spec. Here we go.
That's Natalie's.
I'm not hearing anything.
You will. 2 seconds. It says it's got 15 seconds. Right. I need to share my screen. There's my team bar. Sorry. Very disorganized of me. Include sound. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Gabriel Van Wyk. I'll talk about some of the experiences I've developed over the last few years working with B-Spec. I want to talk about the difficulties that I've come across when people need to deliver B-Spec data. To understand some of the issues, we have to start at the technology. BIM is said to be a methodology for construction lifecycle management. A digital twin is touted to provide a digital representation of the real world for improved decision making. AMS are systems designed to manage and optimize the life cycle of physical assets, including the maintenance, operation, and decommissioning of those assets. To me, it sounds like we should have an overlap of technologies that all should support each other because they have a lot of things in common, but the reality is very different. I've not found anyone that has worked out a smooth transition between these systems. And I have to be honest, although I think that we have a way to work, we have not found a smooth system or a smooth process either. I try to unpack these realities for myself, and these are some of my conclusions. It is difficult, almost impossible, to get the different systems to play nicely together. And I think it's because BIM is developed for a CAD world or from a CAD world. Digital twins was developed from a GIS world. And the asset management systems developed from hierarchical database world, and also a world in which assets have to be managed at a very minute, detailed scale. I then worked out a process that works for me. Actually, I should say, I then worked out what I thought the process was in the industry at the moment, and then modified that so that we have a process that works for ourselves. And I'll come to that towards the end of this discussion. Part of the problem that we are facing is that we're not working in a homogeneous world. Not everybody is using the same software or has the same process. But it all does start with design. Seldom do people use a single design platform, and many different best of breed tools are being used for different aspects of a project, and rightly so. The other part is that the construction process demands precise digital documentation. That's how people work, and that's how they used to work. And it is also probably the most efficient, effective way to build what was designed in a precise manner. But there's also a lot of automation. So a lot of things are ordered automatically. People just, the windows and doors and various other aspects or elements that need to be built into a construction project, they just arrive because somebody in an office somewhere or the software itself ordered the correct stuff and it was sent to site. And the construction team couldn't care about the actual attributes of a particular door or window. They just have to install it. And so the data that's inherent to that asset is of less importance to them. They just have to make it work. And in a sense, the data is irrelevant to them. At one point, I asked AI how easy it is to extract data for asset management and GIS from BIM. And this is the graph that the AI software produced. Okay, so I haven't got a source for this other than to say it's AI, but it makes sense to me. And from what I've come across, it is very hard to extract data from the BIM systems. Revit especially, I can get data out, but it is always in a format that requires a lot of extra manipulation and a lot of extra work in order to get it to work. And we've also developed a system that we built into a Revit model, but that's also hard to maintain because I've got to create attributes and families for every project, and it just becomes rather difficult to manage across many different projects. So not easy. The easiest one, of course, is AutoCAD. The problem with AutoCAD is that it's not attribute rich and it doesn't support and manage attributes as well as what I would expect it to manage and is what is necessary for extracting data for asset management and GIS. There's also some inherent technical issues with the technology stack. Some of the BIM application software internally have different ways in which the data is managed and manipulated. Some of it works with integers rather than reals, and that's just to speed up the way that processing works. Revit specifically has a relatively small 3D model that it works with internally. So it's a proper 3D model and it has its own units. It's actually unit agnostic, so you can tell it that you're working in feet or you tell it that you're working in meters, and it just puts that on at the end of the measurements. Internally, it doesn't actually care what the units are. In terms of spatial positioning, it works roughly in a 30-kilometer effective radius. So you have an insertion point where the model is inserted into the real world, and it stores a scale and a rotation. But the software is internally agnostic of spatial reference systems. So when you have different BIMs that work with the same data or with the same design, then you're going to be really careful, because it's not often straightforward to bring different models together. And if it's in different application platforms, you can be sure that it's not so easy. If I designed, any surveyor will tell you, if you did a survey in one projection system, particular line, and you did another survey using a different projection system, same line, you're going to struggle to get those together. And with Revit, you've only got one single point, and a rotation. And so that's part of the problem that I find working with BIM and applications like Revit. It is spatial reference system agnostic. Some other elements in terms of what makes it hard is delivering proper data is costly, and people are not used to budgeting for proper as-built data. In fact, there's a number of projects that we've worked with where there's been no budget for the as-builts. It's just the surveyor does it on the fly, and we'll give him 2 or 3 days, and that does not allow enough budget to do proper justice to the as constructed drawings. And so therefore there's a lot of fudging. There's a lot of attempts to take the design drawings and just convert them into as-builts, and that just doesn't work in a B-Spec environment. There's also some misconceptions. People think that nobody's going to use the data, and so why should I bother doing it properly? And some people say, well, we'll just do it. Nobody's going to check it, and we'll just get it across the line, because they've done that for years, and all of a sudden, when somebody actually checks the data, it becomes a problem. And then the other part, which is not often talked about, but a disregard for the chain of custody. Well, what is that about? So if I'm a council and I accept data from a developer and I see small errors and I fix them, what I've done is I've now disrupted the chain of custody. I've taken ownership of the data with its errors, and so if there's other data that I discover, the developer has every right to say, well, you've changed the data. I don't know what you've changed, but I know that you've changed some stuff, and so therefore it's up to you to fix it. So regard for the chain of custody is more important than people think, and it's something that we should think about when we accept data from developers, especially if you're a council and you're serious about your data. Next point is digital documents is not data. Well, you can say, but it is data, and you're right, it is actually data, but it's flat and lifeless. It's good for construction processes. It's not good for GIS, digital twins, or asset management systems. We need a lot more. And there is actually a lot more. BIM models contain real good data, but that doesn't come through in your DWGs and your PDFs. There are exchange standards, but those are created from BIM to BIM. So we can generate a BIM model, generate an exchange data file, and import it from one BIM application into another. But it's still a struggle always to take that data and bring it into a GIS or an asset management system without much faffing around with the data. So earlier on, I talked about the construction process with CAD and BIM. This is what I've observed, the process that's in place actually. People start off with feature surveys and point clouds and the legal geometries that's required, and bring that into their BIM and their CAD applications. But they do that in separate in separate ways. So BIM pulls in its data. Sometimes they'll generate a surface in a CAD and then take that over to the BIM. But essentially, the design works or happens in isolated environments. If I have more than one BIM design team, whatever the software they use, there's often not a lot of sharing between those systems. People just start off within the BIM environment. From the BIM models, they generate the PDFs and the DWGs that we talked about earlier on. And those are the digital documents that I referred to earlier. From there, the setouts occur, the construction happens, and we develop the as constructed drawings. I found that a better process, and a process that I think is more practical, is to take the feature surveys, point clouds, cadasters, and to build a reference drawing and include in that drawing topographic surface models, topo solids and aerial photos, and keep that reference model as a source of truth for the start point of the project. Then take that into the BIM or the CAD, do the designs, update the reference from the design, so it becomes a massive big drawing, but it is possible to work with that. And then from the reference drawing, we extract working DWGs and PDFs. So different views, different zoom ins, and use those for the setouts and the construction. And if we did that, then it's easier to keep all the different applications together and to get the different data sets to merge. As for the attributes, we make sure that our reference drawings are full of schedules and other data elements, but we also create exports of the attributes separately, and it's easier to get the attributes extracted from the models and then to map it across to the actual the geometries. So in summary, we build a reference drawing that is sitting outside of the BIM or CADs or whatever other software is being used in the process. We use that reference drawing to feed data into any of the systems that that need to have data, and we also use that then to export the working data files or documents, the PDFs and DWGs, that the construction teams need in order to do what they need to do. We take the as constructed data afterwards, merge that with the attributes from schedules that we've exported, and they, in that way, rebuild the GIS ready data sets. And that's all from me. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the rest of this forum.
Excellent. Thanks, Gaby.
That's my pleasure.
That was very smooth once we got it going. Does anyone have any questions? Probably, given that my tech is falling apart today, best just to take yourself off mute and ask. Well, good then. Must have been very clear, Gaby. So I'll just do a bit of a wrap up for today. I'll hand you over to George and he'll do the wrap up, but I will see you. I won't see you next week, but next week is D-Spec, D for dirt.
Drainage.
Kelly.
Dirty drainage. I had a brain moment. Anyway, so
I like that one. I like that.
George, before I say anything more, over to you.
Yes, I'd rather you say less, but yes, thanks very much. Okay, well, as you can see, we don't mind having a little bit of fun. So, right, the wrap up. So, code lists, spreadsheets continually being updated. Please make yourselves familiar with them. I just want to restate that the access to the web app and the API will be made available to all subscribers. So Gaby will be over the next couple of months be in the process of providing everybody with login access to the API, and also for anyone who needs some advice about incorporating it into their different processes, can do that. If there's an organisation outside of our subscribers, as in our consultants who would like to incorporate the API or use the web app, there's a nominal fee for accessing the API, and Gaby will be able to address that for you. If you're interested, just please email us. Unfortunately, our chat and QA is not optimal at the moment, but if you go onto the A-SPEC website and complete the contact form with that request, we can deal with it, or you can go on to the Digital Hive website. And Kelly, I don't know, can we post that in the Q&A, the link to the Digital Hive website? Anyway, so essentially you can see that we're always looking at continuous improvement, Revit links between the 3D world and the asset management world. Gaby did a fabulous presentation, and so you can see the level of thought that goes into looking at what kind of solution is optimal. From an A-SPEC perspective, we talked about it last year, and here's our new logo for A-SPEC. So the document is currently in draft, and we are commencing with the initial asset class, which is combustible liquid containers. So essentially fuel tanks or anything that might be around that. So there's quite a bit of work that's gone into the fuel tanks, and the research that's done. So that will come out towards the tail end of this year. So post all of the forums and the showcase. We're also looking at EV charging stations. So whilst this came up as a particular issue for A-SPEC, it's likely that the EV charging stations will be linked to the parking feature within A-SPEC. Finally, from an A-SPEC perspective, this is what you can expect. Solar farms. These will be a longer time frame as we're looking to determine the most appropriate spec to fit in, and it may even be, we may even be under a future A-SPEC for energy. A-SPEC, when it comes out, will be available, and it'll be a complementary specification. That is no additional cost to subscribers. We're looking at this to fit asset classes that don't naturally fit into some of the existing specifications. If we're going to create something like an E-SPEC for energy or a G-SPEC for gas or similar, then that will be a full specification in itself. So we've talked about a change. So we have a new initiative. You've experienced a community speaker through Michael Balfour. Next week, our community presentation will be from Mike Freeman from Mitchell Shire Council, who will be talking about from a strategic asset management perspective. But you'll see on my slide that I've got key facilitator Sarah Neski. Now, what does that mean? Well, actually, this is the last time you'll be seeing me in these forums, because on Sunday I head off on leave. And so one of the initiatives that I'm very happy to say Kelly came up with is, well, Actually, I think her words were, "We don't need you anyway, George, so let's just invite someone else to do what you would do." Yeah, thanks for that smile, Kelly. So Sarah Neski has agreed to be our first guest facilitator. So we have guest facilitators and community presentations for all of our forums starting from next week with B-Spec. So we're really excited about that and looking forward to how
Thank you, George.
Kelly?
Django's got his hand up for a question.
Yes, Django.
No, I didn't have my hand up. Oh, damn it. It was supposed to be a surprise thing. But yes, it's sad.
Or applause.
Sad not to see you, George, coming up. But it is good to have guest speakers and look forward to it this year. It's exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we're excited about it. You know, it's one of those bit of nervous excitement, but as I tell my kids when I'm coaching them in basketball, got to get those butterflies flying in formation. So that's how I'm dealing with it at the moment. But you know, we're very happy. I'm actually having a briefing session on Friday with all of the key facilitators that will be on the other forums and to answer any questions they have. So that's where it's at. And Mike Freeman, as I mentioned, he's the manager of strategic assets and property at Mitchell Shire, and he's got a pretty interesting story. We'll be shooting off an email to everybody later this afternoon to remind you about B-Spec and to introduce our key facilitator and our community presenter. We're always looking at how the specs are viewed from different lenses, including how they can be presented. So very excited about that. The common theme, so our theme, as you would have seen, the communiques coming out from Natalie and the team have been about empowering infrastructure management with data excellence. So our themes around governance are really important. Michael showed you and explained to you the difference it made to look at having checklists, to look at doing the prep work. And I know from talking with a lot of the service providers that are on today that you have processes in place. So it's not just for the service providers who support the councils and water authorities, but it's also for the councils and water authorities and other authorities to look at, well, is there something else I can do with my process that's going to give me confidence in the way that we are collecting data about our assets? So we see that the specs are really the toe in the door. Have a look at your processes, have a look at your people. And, you know, Michael again spoke about the communication aspect of it. The technology doesn't really come into it. The technology is certainly an enabler. From our perspective, if we were to look at the key influences, they would be people, then data, then organizations and processes, and then systems. So we want to be resilient enough so that when a system changes, it doesn't trip us up.